Hello, we are back again with another session on Think Ahead with ACCA. My name is Harun Ahmed Jan and I am the Regional Head of Member Affairs for the Middle East, North Africa and South Asia region. Today we have with us Mr. Omer Zaheer Meer, who is a fellow ACCA member, a member of ACCA Pakistan's Members Network panel, and he runs a pioneering ACCA tax practice in Pakistan. The subject, as you might have guessed already, is taxation. And this is so relevant because this time of the year is the time when people who are filing tax returns are thinking about this day and night. Some think about it in their dreams as well. Mr. Omar, why taxation? Why can't we have an economy like that of Middle Eastern countries where there are no taxations, where the life is so peaceful?
Well, first of all, Harun, thank you very much for the nice intro. I also happen to be heading the ACCA's Taxation Committee in Pakistan. Uh, I would like to congratulate you and the entire team on selecting this very pertinent topic. Now, to answer your question in a simple sentence, because we don't have free oil reserves. Basically, taxation is an involuntary or mandatory levy that is charged by government upon its citizen in order to finance its activities, which certainly include providing facilities and economic opportunities to the citizens too.
Okay. And when you talk about government of Pakistan, you talk about governments impose this tax on its people. Which are the authorities in Pakistan or which state-owned organizations in Pakistan are mandated with this task?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. You would be very pleased to know that Pakistan has one of the most complicated taxation system in the globe. We have over 70 different types of taxes and more than 37 regulatory bodies are responsible for their administration, collection, etc. However, I'll make it simpler for our audience here. FBR, the Federal Board of Revenue, is the largest of these bodies. It is responsible for collecting all the federally administered taxes, largely most of them. Post 18 Amendment, the Constitution has devolved some powers to the provinces, which largely includes collecting the sales tax on services. So all the provinces now have their provincial revenue authorities like Sindh Revenue Board, Punjab Revenue Authority, KP Revenue Authority, Balochistan's own Revenue Authority. They all collect those taxes, those provincial taxes. Then we have the local governments which administer and collect the taxes at their level. So broadly speaking, these are the three categories.
Right. So, Omer, you sit on ACCA's Global Forum for Taxation, and this forum brings together tax professionals or tax experts from around the world, which means you get an opportunity to discuss or listen to other professionals when they talk about their taxation systems. You can very well compare Pakistan's tax system, which you've already called very, very complex, with the tax system of other countries. How does it compare?
Global Tax Forum is certainly a very valuable experience because you have these top tax professionals coming from various countries across the globe, sitting together, sharing their insights, their experiences, and it certainly is a platform which provides you the opportunity to have a global exposure and identify the areas where the taxation system of Pakistan can be improved. Now, as I shared with you before, the first thing I would like to point out is simplification of the taxation laws and the taxation system. As we have already discussed, Pakistan has one of the most complicated taxation system in the globe. Would you believe it that a businessman in Pakistan actually has to spend much more time on administering their tax affairs? I'm not even talking about the tax rate here. The amount of time they have to spend on the administration of their taxation affairs is even twice and thrice that their counterparts in our neighboring countries have to do. Then if you come on to the tax rates, the amount of taxation, the types of taxes, again, Pakistan is leading in terms of the rates and the types of taxes. And I'm not even comparing us to the developed world here. I'm talking about the region we are sitting in. So the next stage I would like to identify is the extremely high reliance on indirect taxes. This needs to be reduced for certain ramifications. Then the structural issues, the capacity building that needs to be done within the taxation operators, the harmonization issues, not just between the Federal Revenue Authority, FPR, and the provincial bodies, but between the provincial bodies, and not just on the taxation treatment, rates, etc., but also on the point of jurisdiction. So, largely speaking, these things, along with an awareness campaign and setting up role models and identifying the genuine taxpayers and facilitating them in line with the policies that ACC advocate, such as justice, fairness, transparency, equity for all. If we can embed these principles within our taxation system, these flaws that we have discussed can largely be addressed.
Great. You mentioned direct and indirect taxes. Number one, isn't it double taxation if a person who's already paid direct tax is charged yet again through indirect taxes? And why is government so reliant on indirect taxes? Why can't they just put a little bit more effort and collect direct taxes?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Haru. Oh, yes, it is. It is double taxation. Basically, what's direct tax? You are earning some income, and on that income, you are paying government the due share that government has said you should. Now, you have taken the net amount home, and you want to buy something for your family, the basic necessities of life, maybe some luxury items, etc., etc. Then, out of that amount that has already been taxed, now you again need to pay taxes. So that's happening. So basically, it is actually penalizing those people who are genuine taxpayers and are paying their due share of direct taxes. That first they have to pay the direct taxes on their income, and then they have to pay the indirect taxes. Basically, indirect tax do exist across the globe, but maximum reliance is not placed on indirect taxes, and an effort is made to minimize that for certain reasons. Indirect taxation is basically regressive in nature. What do I mean by that? In direct tax, if you are earning, let's say, 10 million or 20 million or 50 million, look at that smile as I was raising the amount. Okay, let's say you are earning 100 million. The amount of taxation you would pay would certainly be more than someone who is earning just 1 million. Now that is just, that is equitable. You are earning more, you need to pay more. Fair enough. What happens in indirect taxation? You and your driver both go to buy a bottle of milk or a bottle of water and are paying the same amount. So essentially, your driver, who is from a lower segment of society, who is earning much less, is paying more proportion of his income in taxation. Then, beside being regressive, it also results in inflationary pressures because there is a multiplicative effect. When indirect tax is imposed, the cost of the goods across the supply chain or the services across the supply chain is multiplied and the cost increases. As we all know, we live in a global village. There is global competition. The result is that you become less competitive. Your exports fall. So when your exports fall, you are less competitive. There are lower job opportunities. Then people are earning less. So it's like a cycle that goes on and on and on. Now the question: if there are these things, then why our policymakers are putting such heavy reliance on indirect taxation? Well, while representing ACCA, also in my personal capacity, I have had the honor to interact with them. I'm also on the board of about half a dozen think tanks, so there is quite a regular interaction. Their point of argument is that since the economy is largely undocumented and people avoid in their perception to pay taxes, so this is the way how we get the taxes out from them. For that, we have proposed them from ACCA's platform. In our last budget proposal, you would remember, and even the year before and the year before, in the last three budget proposals, we have proposed them a pilot project. We have proposed them, why don't you come on to a solution? And what is the solution? We'll discuss that in a bit when you ask.
Interesting. So, Umar, can you share some details of the pilot project that we proposed to FBR? So, why don't you share some details on it?
Sure. Although you are very well aware of that, since being a head of member affairs, you have been actively involved with us in the entire process. Well, the issue that we have just discussed, ACCA has created an out-of-box solution, and I, being the head of ACCA's taxation committee, was honored to actually drive that process. The process was this: that we suggested them that why don't you go on a single stage, low income tax rate, and follow the volume over margin strategy, that you increase the tax base many times instead of having 12 lakh 20,000 filers, of which a large number do not pay any tax, they are nil return filers. What if you can have 5 million, 10 million, 20 million taxpayers? The burden would be less on each taxpayer, but the kitty of the government would be filled several times more. So, to address their concern, we suggested a pilot project that the tax avoidance cost is roughly 10 to 12%. Go for a lower single digit income tax rate, select one industry in one city where you have minimal revenue, and see the result. We
Right.
believe that you'll have higher revenue collections, and if you do, then you have a solution to this problem that you are facing, and it's going on like the hen and the egg, that the taxpayer is not paying. They are saying, okay, the government has such higher tax rate and there's no solution in sight. So if this pilot project is actually implemented without any detriment to the large scale government revenue, we might actually have some solution.
So this gap, the low revenue with the tax collection and sort of etc., is the gap because of shortcomings of our policy, or is it a gap with the enforcement and implementation of the said policy?
Well, again, Harun Saab, that's a very relevant and intelligent question. Yes, there's a big issue of enforcement. If that can be resolved, the tax collection would certainly be much improved and many times more. Having said that, I'll repeat again, there is a lot of room for improvement within the policy sphere. We need to simplify our taxation laws. We need to simplify our taxation system in line with the global practices and the need of the country. I would go to the extent to suggest that we should start planning to pursue the goals advocated by ACCA of voluntary tax compliance.
So, Umar, in simpler terms, gross domestic product. Uh, what is it? And when we say Pakistan has low tax to GDP ratio, what does that mean and how can this be improved?
Okay, so we are up to discussing some technical stuff now. Good. Well, Harun, GDP, gross domestic product, simply said, is basically the total value of all the products and services produced locally in an economy minus the cost of the inputs. Simple. So, in a simple term, you can take example like a household, the income potential of the household or the actually income that the household is generating. So GDP is basically the economy of the country in terms of what they are producing locally minus the cost of the input. Coming on to the second question that you ask, why the tax to GDP ratio is low in Pakistan and how it can be improved. Well, it is low because of all the issues that we have discussed before. The lack of trust by the taxpayer, the structural issues, the complications of the taxation system, all these issues we have discussed extensively, they are basically resulting in a very low or somewhat now improved but still low tax to GDP ratio. How it can be improved? Well, in the same manner we have discussed, by addressing these flaws, by pursuing a policy of voluntary compliance, just and fairness taxation. Actually, I would like to share an incident with you here, and I wouldn't name anyone in line with ACCA's policy. I was sitting with an ex finance minister of Pakistan, and we were having a discussion on a similar topic, and he shared his experience with me. He said when he became the finance minister, some officials came to him for a departmental briefing, and it were basically the typical things that people don't want to pay taxes and all that, and we need to go hard, heavy-handed, and we need to ensure we mint out the maximum money to achieve our revenue target. Luckily for us, this minister was actually not only technically sound, but he was someone who had a very wide global exposure. He actually pursued the strategy which now we are advocating also, and we have been for a long time. What he did, he said no, there would be a voluntary compliance. All the people file their tax return, whatever they believe is their due taxation, and along with relevant documentation file. Nobody will come to their offices. There would be no element of any actual or perceived harassment. There would be no audit whatsoever. Anybody who has filed a return and has that certificate at their shop, etc., nobody would bother them.
No questions asked.
He was sharing with me that was the only time in the recent memory that not only did we meet our targets in real term, there was actually a real growth recorded. Later on, he claimed that once he resigned, the strategy was reversed. It was
again.
back to the old tactics, and there was a decline in real terms. There is increase in nominal term adjusted for inflation, but there is no real increase. So, in fact, if we can move toward voluntary compliance, simplification, and perhaps the starting point can be the pilot project we have suggested, I honestly believe we have a solution at our hands here.
So, Omer, you've talked about voluntary taxation. I mean, the world has moved on from tax aversion to tax avoidance, and now societies are propagating voluntary taxation. What should our behavior or our attitude be towards taxation as a society?
Well, again, Harun, that's a good question to ask. Let's be a bit frank about this. Um, in our society, people normally claim that they are waiting for the excellent standards of governance to be met before they'll start paying their due share of taxes. The problem with that is the government need to function. They need to have finances to run their affairs, build infrastructure, hospitals, schools, other facilities, provide economic opportunities to its citizens. Now, if the government is not able to collect sufficient taxes, what would happen? The state need to run, it need to finance its operation. How would it do that? By borrowing. What would be the impact? The inflation in the economy would start increasing. A larger share of the GDP, the budget would actually go towards servicing the debt. You'll continuously be in that cycle. The economic opportunities for us all would not be what they could be. So, if for nothing else, if not even for the ethical responsibility, the national responsibility, then even for your own personal interest, we as individuals have to realize that if we start paying our due shares of taxes, the standard of governance will start improving, and we will also have better economic opportunities. This is what I believe our approach should be towards taxation.
People still perceive that it's a catch 22, I mean, chicken or the egg. But I think it's clear in this case that we should uh, perform our duties first. We should pay our taxes first and then expect the positive things to start happening. A
Well
final
said.
question.
Well said. I would, with your permission, just like to add here that this change in approach can only be achieved by addressing the valid concerns that we have discussed before. Simplifying the taxation system, moving towards voluntary compliance, improving the capacity of the revenue building authorities, making it easier for the genuine taxpayers, and then we can have this thing too.
A final question. Um Taxation as a choice of career for young professionals. What do you advise? What do you think about it?
Fantastic. Let me tell you, as a fellow ACCA member myself, and most of our senior colleagues would also testify to this, taxation is the most lucrative area for any accountant as compared to any other area. Secondly, in Pakistan, there is a big shortage of quality tax professionals. Quality tax professionals. There's always room at the top, and in Pakistan, we have a saying that if you have a good lawyer, a good accountant, and a good doctor, you can live peacefully. So if you can fill gap in one of these three, imagine the magnitude and the opportunities that can open the doors up for you. So I would say to all our viewers here that taxation in Pakistan uh, is an area which is going to develop. The focus on taxation is increasing. The nature of the economy is changing. With the advent of CPAC, it is going to change even further. The economy will start to get documented. Differential tax treatment, something we didn't discuss much about, but is a very good governmental policy which should continue and should even develop from filer non-filer to taxpayer versus non-taxpayer to reap further benefits. All these things taken put together, I'm looking at a future where the opportunities in taxation would be even much more than they are currently. And ACCA equip our members, our affiliates, our students to be able to fulfill this role. I would also suggest to them to go for local laws, especially if they aim to practice in Pakistan. If they aim to work in Pakistan, knowledge of local laws and taxation is essential. You being head of member affairs, and I've been honored to be a part of the initiative, have run several webinars and training sessions on local laws.
Thank you very much, Umar, for this wonderful conversation. I'm sure in this video there are good messages for all of us as a society, for the tax regulators, and thank you very much for everyone for watching.